Welcome to our Welcome to our PM section, which is the International Symposium on Health Equity and Resilience. This afternoon, we will discuss several topics in health equity. We have a group of experts who will discuss specific topics. Before we open and officially start our presentation, I would like to invite Dr. Chen, who is the director of our Behavioral Science and Community Health Department, to do this opening remark.
Thank you. I'm Chen Zhang, Professor and Director at the Institute of Health Behaviors and Community Sciences. Our Dean, Mr. Chen Shouxiang, should be chairing this session, but I apologize because there's a grant review meeting, which is hugely important in the main campus, so he couldn't come, so I apologize. But he sent his appreciation to all the attendants and particularly our guests. And so this symposium was possible because of the generous donation from the KB Chen Foundation and also the grant from this Population Health Research Center funded by the Ministry of Education. And so we think that they will support and to make this symposium possible. So we're really grateful that we have international leading researchers, speakers to talk about health, equity, and resilience. So I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zhang. Our first speaker would like to invite Dr. Wenying Sylvia Zhou Wenying. Dr. Zhou is a program director in Health Communication and Informatics Research Branch of the Behavioral Research Program at National Cancer Institute in the United States. She's a prolific health communication scholar with over 100 peer-reviewed publications. I'd like to say that again. And have led many NIH initiatives on the impact of the evolving communication landscape on public health and cancer control. She has a PhD in linguistics, and I still feel very amazed, from Georgetown University and PhD from UC Berkeley. Her title today will be Communicating About Health in an Evolving Information Landscape, Implications for Health Equity. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that kind introduction, and thank you so much for the invitation. I'd like to thank Shu Wei Laoshi for nominating me, and sort of we had a chance to meet during a conference and had a really interesting discussion. I've always long admired the public health infrastructure and practice in Taiwan because I grew up here, but I've been away for over 30 years. So it's really a pleasure to be back and share some of the work that we've been doing at NIH, specifically at NCI. I have kind of an unusual job. If you think about it, we wear two hats. The one hat is the funder, so we write funding opportunities, and we help to steer the field of health communication for public health. My second hat is a researcher, so I think we're a more effective administrator if we also practice what we preach. So I am involved in a lot of different types of work, from patient-provider communication to health literacy, to social media, and the last 8 years I've focused a lot of my attention on understanding and addressing health misinformation. So as you know, this is a topic that a lot of people find very difficult to deal with, and we've done a lot of research to look at the causes and consequences of it. So today I'm going to be hopefully fairly succinct, and I'm going to keep some of my remarks at a higher level. If you need specific references, I have a lot of literature I can share. So what I'd like to do is to talk about communication about health in an evolving information landscape. And given that the theme of today is health equity, I'm going to tie all of my remarks to inequalities. I have three goals. One is to talk about why communication matters and why it matters for health equity. I'm going to characterize the current information environment, and then I'm going to share some of the top-line findings from our work in health misinformation. I'm not sure if the Chinese word is 假新闻. Is that right? 假新闻,健康传播方面的假新闻, something like that. And really, there's so much lessons to be learned from what I think I have personally learned and talked to people about for our practice of public health. And then we'll end with some examples and suggestions for how to build resilience through effective communication. Why does communication matter? You probably think about it in terms of billboards, different. You read about campaigns, health campaigns. You also think about how doctors communicate with their patients, but there are many different definitions. But the idea is often to inform, influence, or persuade people or communities about important health issues. And we think about who is a communicator and who is an audience. And sometimes what the communicator tries to accomplish is vastly different from what the audience hears or understands. And we know that communication could be about informing someone, like how does the microRNA vaccine work? Or you could be trying to tell people it's important to wear a mask in this situation. That's more of an art of persuasion. Or in this case, it's just a screen cap during one of the White House press conference where people were asked about why do you call this pandemic a Chinese virus? And we may argue that's actually propaganda. You're using health to persuade someone or using misinformation to persuade someone about another agenda. So also, health communication is not the same as science communication. And I think sometimes we conflate the two. Health communication always had the goal of the health and well-being of people, whereas science communication may simply be about summarizing or telling people about scientific findings. Sometimes the two are the same, but they're not always. Why does it matter? Because how we get exposed to and what we learn about health affects our attitudes and our decision making. Sometimes the communication is just conveying information. Sometimes it facilitates action, telling people where to get a service, for example. Sometimes it's more social and instrumental and communal. So last year, we had a lot of health communication efforts going on at the NIH in the US. Some of them faced challenges and we couldn't continue. And we had an opportunity to publish a JAMA piece. And in this case, we talked about what we see as important goals and priorities for public health. We think we need to consider ways to involve communication science early, rather than, like I said earlier, an afterthought. Also, it's not enough to just bring researchers to do this work. We need communicators, actual practitioners to be involved. And I know we'll hear more about sort of action research, and a lot of that is about bringing community and people who are actually on the ground doing the work into the fold as you design your research. I can't emphasize how important that is, because we talk to so many people in public health practice. We say, what do you need from health communication? They always tell us, please make it useful for us. So how do we produce more useful research is a big goal. And then these are the realities. Where people get information, what do they encounter, attend to disparities in access, and social media is changing so much, and how we do research in social media has changed as well. This is my new slide, and it may look very simple, but I put it out because I get asked this question, why do you care about misinformation? This area of research has actually, unfortunately, been maligned. People think about it as something else. So I say, let's get back to the basics. Why do we care? Because we want to make sure all people, regardless of their background, have timely access to high quality, accurate, and understandable information. Not only do they have access, they have to trust that information and act on it. And when they see something that's false, they can identify it and not spread it. So those are some of my reflections. But of course, to do that work, we have to think about disparities and differences. Have you heard of the term digital divide, the digital divide? The idea that people have unequal access to whether it's smartphones, technologies, or information. And that's often patterned together with access to healthcare. So people with less access to information often also have less access to care. There are traditional vulnerabilities. We've all seen hundreds and hundreds of showing you SES and other areas. But there are other vulnerabilities that have been less studied, such as identity, your worldview. How do you think about media diet? What are you eating when you're accessing information, essentially? The network you live in, your affect, your emotions. I tell people fear and wrath, rage, are very effective communication tools. If you can tap into someone's anger, you can sell them anything, essentially. So we think about these vulnerabilities now, and we think about ways to better measure these, right? And also you can have access, but if you don't have digital literacy or health literacy, you may make use of bad information, and that's not helpful. Dr. Besweneth from Harvard has a very nice model that brings social inequalities together with communication inequality to show that health communication outcomes are both a predictor and mediator and outcomes when it comes to understanding health disparities. That's not enough. We talked a lot about communication, but you know, a big central component of communication is really trust. I'm going to just show you a few Pew data. This is the easy place. If you go to Pew, you can find very up-to-date information on kind of a cross-section of the US. We have data on measurement of trust. And we see that confidence in scientists have not changed too much, but it's generally fairly low when it comes to before or after the pandemic. This is an interesting one, and I know race and ethnicity, we talked earlier this morning, is oversimplified, but in this particular survey, it seemed like Asians have a higher confidence in scientists, at least in the US. And this is the most important one. Trust in science, at least within the US, is very patterned sort of politically. If you see, this is people who self-identify as Republicans or Democrats. Their views on science, so the line above is positive generally, below is negative. Every single measure seemed to be patterned based on political affiliation, according to the Pew data. So that's something of note. I know I'm usually, in our survey, we don't ask political affiliations, but this data is, you know, it's been replicated many times, so that's just an observation. And I think the most important piece to take away from this study is that people are less on the fence between 2016 and 2020. People often say, oh, trust is diminishing in the US, and I always have to remind people it's not quite true, because actually, if you look at it, there's more people growing to trust science and growing to trust science less. But just very few people say, I don't know anymore. So in other words, this data shows that trust is polarized. It's another area of polarization. So now I'm going to switch gear to talk about what's changed in the health communication landscape. Here are some of the key features, and I think you will all agree with these, hopefully. We are seeing a ubiquity of mobile smartphones and devices. We also have everybody's spending more time online, on screen time, 24-hour news cycle. We also have a fragmented media environment. Internet is becoming a primary source of health information. There's a growing use of social media, which means that you self-curate your content, as well as algorithmically you're pushed to consume certain content. So, you know, I look at one pair of shoes, and the next day, all I get is shoe ads, right? I don't even care that much about shoes, but clearly the algorithm is working so well that it knows that I want to look at shoes, right? So that's all because of algorithms. So both self-curation and algorithm has made us more, siloed in our information consumption. There's also more AI-generated content. I think that's the next frontier in health communication. By the way, this is not an actual picture, but I just always love it because it looks pretty good. With an AI-generated coffee coat. But the AI tools, I use it to show it's not just textual data, right? Image data, deep fakes are super ubiquitous now and very powerful. countries regulate social media as well as AI communication. So to conclude, social media affects health, but anything that has the benefits has also a risk. So when we see social media bringing people together, allowing LGBTQI communities to come out and all be supported by one another, we also see harassment, bullying, and hate speech. We get to do a lot more tailored work. At the same time, it also means people are more in their silos. We see easier information access, but if you just access but don't have the adequate health literacy, it can be a risk. It's low-cost, real-time outreach. It also means low-cost, rapid spread of anecdotes. You can promote healthy behavior. I have some fantastic brands that are using Twitter to do physical activity and tobacco cessation work, but we also have communities that normalize like healthy eating and so on. So peer-to-peer interactions is wonderful because you don't have gatekeeper. But similarly, without gatekeeper, you can have other problems. So in other words, all of that affects these things. From decision making, you heard, I do my own research, I don't trust other people, right? You can start to not trust experts, and it can affect patient-provider relationships. Case in point, at the beginning of the pandemic, I remember vaccine was in the discussion. This is before the rollout of the COVID vaccine. And I heard one of my pediatrician friends saying that, oh, I'm firing this patient, this parent. Oh, I don't know how to deal with him. I've heard patients saying, I'm firing my doctors. Because, and so you're seeing, instead of an opportunity to come together and discuss why do we make informed decisions about something, people are not comfortable with engaging with people whose views are different from them. So I think the fractured patient-provider relationship is a real stressor or a risk factor when it comes to effective health communication. Also, if you get a lot of people saying different things, you can start to say, I don't know who to believe. So you end up with both anxiety, confusion, and even apathy. I don't know, throwing my hands out. We have a survey at NCI called Health Information National Trend Survey. We asked a lot of questions about cancer beliefs, and fatalism was one. When I hear cancer, I think of death. Or I don't know what to do because nothing I can do can prevent my cancer. We're seeing that when you are distrusting of medical authority, you're more likely to have fatalistic views. And there's stigma, and there's shifting public discourse because certain topics in public health becomes politicized. It can exacerbate health disparities. So now I'm going to switch gear again and talk a little bit, just a few slides, on the research on health misinformation. I don't know if it's a topic that's studied here at NTU. If anybody's doing this work, I'd love to learn from your context here. So I get asked a lot, why now? Are we facing a perfect storm when it comes to health misinformation? I would say there are a few things we know from all of this. There's a lot of research. I just did not bother putting all the citation here. We're seeing such ubiquity in health content. We also know that environments are siloed, and sometimes we live in our own echo chambers. Falsehoods spread much faster than truth and also garner more emotional engagement. Credible and evidence-based information is often complex, nuanced, evolving, and uncertain. Disinformation campaigns erode a sense of consensus and can actually drive divisions. How many of you have seen this paper from AJPH? I'll never forget it because I was holding an NCI workshop on health misinformation 2018 in the summer, and I was supposed to be discussing for the second day. And in the morning at 6, this paper came to my attention. And it changed everything I would say, because basically colleagues at GW, George Washington, looked at Twitter data for vaccine-related content. And they found two things. So much vaccine content on Twitter was actually generated by Russian bots and trolls. So these were deliberate. It's not just crazy uncle tell me somebody something, right? There's an actual, campaign behind it. they're amplifying pro-vaccine and anti-vaccine content. Why? Because it generates a debate. It engineers a controversy. So engineered controversy in health is, I think, the takeaway for me. It's not about just giving people accurate information. It's about how do we stop this kind of come down the temperature and stop the fight, because it's not a real fight. So I get people saying, oh, this topic is controversial. And I have to sometimes say, maybe it's an air quote, because that controversy may actually be created. You know, there was maybe not a lot of basis for it. So I think that's a very important paper by David Roniatowski. This paper by Xiaoli Nan, I know we have some Maryland alumni here, is looking at susceptibility to misinformation. And she also found that it's very much a pattern. The way people make reasoning, like deliberate reasoning people, are less likely to fall victim, and so on. And this was the study we talked about earlier. I think someone was asking if they could access the study in JPH that connected COVID-19 with this hashtag, and that was actually connected to real-world violence. Right. So, quick definition, and I think it's important to make a definition because when we say health misinformation, sometimes people think it's anything that's uncertain. I would say we actually hold a very high bar. We're talking about false, inaccurate, or misleading information about health, statement of facts, that are contrary to the best available evidence at the time. Disinformation is a subset of misinformation because it gets at the intent. So this is actually a coordinated or deliberate effort to spread misinformation in order to gain power, money, or reputation. Even the best definitions don't get a lot of insight. You can't sometimes ascertain intent. You can't easily ascertain impact of exposure. I was at a California testified in front of a committee, and they were really interested in doing something about misinformation. And they asked me, what's the cost, healthcare expenditure, as a result of misinformation? It's a difficult question to answer because the dot connecting exercise has not been done. We have great data on how much misinformation is out there, a little bit on exposure, and we have health endpoint, but we haven't connected them. So I think there's a lot of work to really get at these consequences. I'm just showing you a few things because even weather-related efforts, there was misinformation. Also, this is to me a very good example of visual misinformation. There's actually no deliberate falsehood, right? It's a picture of a cute baby, but it's spreading vaccine misinformation. So we've been doing a lot of work to sort of chart the directions for what research priorities should focus on. I published on these, so you can find them later. But basically, we talked about better surveillance, better consequences, better understanding of consequences, targeting and understanding psychological drivers, and mitigation efforts. What interventions can we do? This is a publication that's recent, that's looking at, so I already digested all the papers, so if you want to know what mitigations have worked, I hope this paper can help you, because I looked at a lot of papers, 15, and we looked at what efforts were tested to mitigate the harms of misinformation. And we showed examples, and we gave some conclusions. So the top 3 ways are correcting, right, debunking. You guys probably have heard of this idea that if you correct something, you may actually cause people to further their belief in something. Well, for the most part, that's not true. So backfire effects are fairly minimal. But corrections work much better when the topic is not entrenched. So we actually, I don't know if I put it in here. We did a study at the beginning of COVID. We gave people, we asked people attitudes about 3 topics. You know, we asked about, and I know social distance is a bad word. It's not helpful, I should say. But we asked people for their intention to do these 3 things. And we found that this was when hydroxychloroquine was touted as a cure. We found that an effect in correction, people were less likely to believe it and doing experimental treatment. But we didn't see an effect in the other two topics. So I think the important thing here is that when you do correction, it works better if the topic has not been so entrenched in the public discourse. Inoculation is another effort, which is getting people to understand the techniques for being manipulated. What does it look like? And then give them a little doses of misinformation. And that's been a big area of research. And there are also a lot of practical strategies. So it's not really that we don't know anything. We have some tried and true techniques. So here are some. It's helpful when you're talking about health to not just use one source. Don't say the CDC said this, or UC Berkeley researchers tell you to do this. But you actually leverage a broad range of sources that are trusted. Also, it's helpful to have a top-line message. How many of us read the entire newspaper article or paper? So really make sure your agenda-setting top-line messages are clear. Avoid leaving an information vacuum and ceding the environment to others. You should identify not just the information, but the sources of this information and the techniques and motivations for manipulation. So I tell people it helps to counter themes and tropes rather than whack-a-mole game of fact-checking every anecdote. Also, understand the scientific processes, how data is derived, what do we know about that. And most importantly, avoid false balance. I've been very passionate about not just talking about content, but thinking about relationship. So I think it's helpful for health community to think it's not just about message testing and messaging. It's about building relationships and recognizing that personal connections may be the most persuasive aspect of communication. So this paper discusses ways that we can use relationship-based health communication to advance public health. And I know the topic today is on building resilience, so I'm showing you a model that I've created that allows for a health communication research to always be translational. And to close, I wanted to echo what the Surgeon General's work on misinformation said is about collaboration. So if you're in academia, think about other areas, and I know later we'll hear more about collaboration going outside of your sectors. But I think all of these areas need to work together. So I always tell people, if you can find people in other groups, it's always helpful to connect with them when it comes to the topic of health communication. Because I think it takes all of us, and it takes multi-level, multi-sector collaboration. So I will end here by saying I have a colleague from Korea. This is a movie I really enjoyed. It's a zombie movie. I think we had a sci-fi movie earlier on from your talk, Train to Busan. This movie had some really interesting key ingredients of a zombie apocalypse. And I think about that because I think we're seeing a lot of active ingredients of misinformation in our world. And unfortunately, there is politicization of these topics. So we need to think about what vested interest is at play and focus on the vulnerable population by doing more collaborative work. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Zhou. I'd like to invite Dr. Boyao Huang of our own. He's an assessor of Institute of Health Behaviors and Community Sciences, College of Public Health here at National Taiwan University. His research interests are science and technology studies, gender studies, media studies, and anthropology, just to name a few. He has an MA in journalism from National Zhengzhi University and a PhD in communication from University of California, San Diego. Welcome.
Right, thank you. So yeah, that's great. So wonderful to be able to respond to your talk. So today I'm going to frame this talk by following your title, A Changing Landscape. So in your talk, you discuss a lot of changing landscape, both in communication and health communication. And I think your definition of health communication not only resonates with the WHO's definition, which is a state of complete physical and mental social well-being, But it also opens up some possibility both to think about the inequality within health communication. So immediately I can think of, on top of my head, is Nicholas Rowe's critique on health. So it's our growing capacity of control, manage, engineer, reshape, and modulate our lives. And it also resonates with the ways in which Jonathan Metal's definition on health. Health is a term with value judgment. So health communication is essentially dealing with all those value judgment. And it also resonates with the ways in which Adele Clark proposed that health is in itself a process through which the aspect of life previously outside of the judicial of medicine comes into understand as the ways in which we understand as health. So this is involving landscape of health. But it also involves But it also involves the ways in which, when we look back about health communication, a very compressed history. So we are pretty much at here right now at the history of AI. But just 20 years ago, we're still watching those younger generation in the group. Newspaper is a paper that print on a daily basis and with news on top of it. So no one's reading newspaper anymore. But just a couple years ago, 20 years ago, we're still pretty much rely on newspaper and so on and so forth. So recognizing the importance of health communication is also a way for us to recognize the change in materiality of communication. So if we were taking both changing landscape into consideration, so let me return to Marshall McLuhan, his famous quote, the media is the message, 媒介就是讯息. So the media is essentially our extension of our social and emotional well-being. So if that's the foundation that we are thinking about, how do we reconceptualize trust in the time of digital media? So along with my student in our course, we have been doing a lot of practice. So on the one hand, we are thinking about what's the area of study of social media. Whereas on the other hand, in public health, we also encourage students to identify the key topics that we can study. So as you can see, there are so many overlaps. So as hard as we tried, we still left something that we cannot really tease out. We cannot identify whether or not this is social media phenomena or health phenomena. Some of them are intimacy, identities, privacy, data surveillance, and the consumer, which means is the producer and the consumer combined together as our identity. So the relationship between social media and health remained very, very unclear in 2024, and it demands more scrutiny. So some of the questions based on your presentation I can think of is, what are media? So let's return to the original question. What are media? And how are they socially and digitally used? How do we define the content and scope of being social, being digital, being together? That's also a question that demands more scrutiny. And last but not least, what's health? And are we still claiming and proposing a universal definition of health? Or just like the very final slide that Sylvia proposed, we are looking for a more content-specific, more relational approach into health communication. So it's also the time when we should move beyond the traditional model from mass communication to a more nuanced understanding of digital health and digital media and health. So this is my proposal. So if we could think about things through not only from the mass media or digital media's materiality, but through the mediatization, 媒介化, this is something that we can do. We can think of media as a conduit to look at the volume, the spread, the speed, and the reach, and the level of involvement. Basically, to look at the ways in which media can amplify our voice. And we can also be looking at language and the environment to examine the representation, the performance, and the media practice, so that we can have more holistic perspective. So this is, my time is up, so this is recognizing the importance of Sylvia's work. And last but not least, so this is my proposal. So we should go beyond this kind of a purely biomedical approach into health. more holistically looking at how health or health communication or digital health grapples us or engage, allow us to think about identity, social practice, and social politics.
Thank you, Dr. Huang. Please stay on the stage for just a moment. We have 2 minutes, so I'd like to open for questions, maybe one or two questions. Any questions from the audience or from our experts? Question in the back.
Okay, thank you very much. It's very, very interesting. I'm actually using the Health Information National Trend Survey in my own study, so I found it very, very interesting. And on the topic of misinformation, I feel like Facebook and other social media sites are constantly saying, oh, we're going to get rid of misinformation, we're going to be more strict. Have you found that to be true at all, or it's not really?
No. I think it's a moving target, but there was a lot more interest earlier on, but I think there's some backfire, and right now I would say it's pretty much not sufficiently regulated. But I would say if we focus on health disparity, it's even worse in other languages. So there's data on Spanish content. On Facebook, for example, there is actually more risky or false information. So I think it's interesting to look at like the European model, where they actually make a lot more policies against the spread of misinformation and hate speech. I think it would be really neat to look at cross, sort of global comparison, and lots of opportunity for research, in other words. Yeah, thank you for your question. And if you are using hints, you can tell your friends about it, because it's free. Anybody can look at it and use it, and even write papers using this data. So it's at hints.cancer.gov if anybody wants to find it.
Second question, maybe? Do you have another question from the audience?
Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. My research topic is suicide, and also I'm very interested in social media and its impact on suicide, actually misinformation. So normally people think about one particular method of suicide, perceived very not painful and painless, but which is not. I think that is misinformation from the method of suicide. So if it happened, what could be response to this misinformation?
Maybe I'll ask you a question back. What do you think is the motivation behind sharing that type of information, that saying that it's not painful? Like who is doing it and why are they doing it?
Because some of the social media describe the method, maybe like movie or drama in Korea, especially using charcoal or coal breaking, and they describe the suicide behavior very painlessly. So that is why people perceive this method is not painful. So they learn a lot from this, cognitively learn from this social media information. I think that is misinformation in me, and I want to change this misinformation to correct, to provide, oh, this is very important and this is very dangerous information, dangerous method, so you may not be, try this one. Yeah.
Actually, that's I didn't know about that. It's a really good example of a kind of challenge we have. And I actually thought about some of the work you said, Boyal, about kind of bringing people outside of our health domain. Like, have you heard of like entertainment media, or using, there used to be the Hollywood and Society effort. They're trying to seed health content into Hollywood shows and like people who are writing. I feel like there could be an opportunity to counter that type of misinformation by bringing creative, artistic minds and maybe writing it into a TV drama. And And also, I wonder if it helps to have more of a, again, going back to relationship, because I think social isolation is the flip side of also a cause of, suicidal ideation. So rather than thinking about correcting that particular myth, fostering more connection and connectivities, maybe a longer term solution. But I don't have an answer, so I just sort of talked about what I thought. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I also don't have the answer for that now. Yeah, I also don't have specific answer for that right now. But in the Hollywood industry or any sort of entertainment industry, there's a strong tendency to romanticizing death. And for them, I don't think that the intent is to promote this misinformation in any way. But I also think that, Sylvia, you are right in that engage stakeholders outside from the science communication or health communication, provide more educational, pedagogical opportunities for us to enhance not only our health literacy, but also literacy in a larger scale, so that we can address misinformation issue.
Okay, one last question. We got 3 hands raised. Maybe we should do Dr. Kim first. Yeah, and Linda, you're next.
I like both of your talk, but since I'm working on infectious disease, particularly like dengue virus need a community mobilization. So I was wondering how you have one slide about historical changes related to communication. And so I was wondering how could we use the AI to help community mobilization and also health education?
This is a really large question. Again, I don't have a specific answer for it. In part because in the College of Public Health, we are, or from my observation, limited observation, a lot of faculty members are still very hesitating in adapting AI into our teaching, into our communication, into our dialogue. And I think to begin that conversation perhaps is one step further into our education.
In my dream, it would be that the building here, the School of Public Health, finding other parts of campus that knows more about these areas and finding opportunities to collaborate. And I know that requires infrastructure and funding, but that was my thinking about health communication is we can't do it just in public health. We need the School of Journalism, communication media, in terms of AI, data science, engineering. We need to find ways to foster those kind of and incentivize such communication.
I have a humorous idea is that the short film actually attract younger generation.
Yeah,
So that can use AI to make to reach more number of people for health education.
we can definitely maximize reach. Yeah, I would say we need to probably pilot it and try it out because also some people are turned off by AI generated. They feel like they're fooled, right? So I have a pretty sizable portfolio on chat bots right now, getting chat bots to do all kinds of things. And I often wonder, is the authenticity an issue? So there are a lot of questions, I think, about how we can actually leverage AI, which is here to stay. We can't just look the other way. Thank you.
All right, very last question from Linda.
Hey, not a question, but just a comment about, I'm glad you mentioned Hollywood Health and Society because that's a great organization. And as Dr. Cho said, what they do is they insert science-based messages into movies, television, and whatever. And I actually did a little bit of work with them. There's a series in the US called Grey's Anatomy. And they will call people down, and so they asked me to prepare some scenes that had to do with patient-provider communication. So it was a lot of fun, and people here can offer their services.
Thank you, Linda. Any further comments? No? All right. Thank you for Dr. Zhou and Dr. Huang's presentation and comment. Thank you.